Good morning. I'm Dr. Susan Roach from Louisiana Tech. I'm a folklorist there, and I'm very happy to welcome you to this session of Louisiana storytelling by our guest, Dr. John Wilson. Now, he is a doctor of nursing. And so we're going to talk just a few minutes here with him and ask a few questions that I know you have already asked me. So anyway, we'll get started, and then he's going to do some stand-up for us, I think, something like that. Anyway, Dr. Wilson, you're from Alexandria?
Correct.
And how did you come to storytelling? How is the tradition connected with you and your family?
In terms of my family, I come from a long line of storytellers and liars, although they probably wouldn't admit to one part of those. And it's never been in a formal setting. It's typically been in a more informal, family reunions or just interactions, or with the general public in some cases, just whatever the situation dictates. There was a local storytellers group in Alexandria, and I made contact with them initially, and then I was in school and everything at the time, so I couldn't really commit to it. Then when I was finally out of school, they were sponsoring a liars competition. And so I signed up for it. I competed the first time and I lost, and it's like, well, I've got good material. And then it turns out, they said, well, the reason you lost was you didn't have a story. You were just describing something, but you didn't really have a story. So then I had to meld my ideas into story forms. And after that, I won 3 times. Now they have an international competition, as it were, in England at Stanton, I think. It's called the World's Biggest Liar. And that's an official competition that's been going on for some time now. I have not made it to England yet. I don't know if I'd qualify, or, if anybody's willing to pony up money for the ticket, I'd be glad to attend.
Now, you said that in your publicity that I saw that you did mostly Cajun humor. Is that correct?
Cajun influent. Initially, when I came about developing my persona and everything, I tried to affect a persona of an elderly Cajun man, but I'm not well versed in it enough to the point that I can maintain the accent and the diction and everything.
So it's not part of your own heritage. Well, are you Cajun?
It's part of my heritage, but in growing up in Alexandria, when I was growing up, when I was really young, my mom was a Bordelon, and that's pretty Cajun. That's a lot of Avoyelles Parish is Bordelon. And she still spoke with the Cajun inflection and everything. And I remember as a child, I would say things like, "Golly," and things like that. But eventually, just being around Alexandria, and people don't really have accents, in terms of Cajun accents, so it gradually lost a little bit of effect. And then I actually in first grade had a little bit of a speech impediment. I had the Elmer Fudd syndrome. I couldn't say my R's, I had W's instead. And so when I went to a couple of sessions of speech therapy, so they taught me how to speak slowly and enunciate. And so that also kind of, I think, had an effect of kind of alleviating some of the accent.
And it may have changed some of your Southern accent.
A bit.
A little bit.
People usually ask me where I'm from, and it's like, here. Yeah.
Yeah, so you grew up in sort of a family that was just probably straight white Caucasian sort of.
Typical blue collar.
Blue collar, okay. And do you tell those stories? I know that there's some great liars up from where I come from.
Are they in politics?
Well, that too. But they had, like at the Corny Creek Festival up in Bernice, they would have a lion contest, and they would tell stories about the ducks flying off with the frozen pond and all this kind of tall tales. Mm-hmm. Do you tell tall tales?
It's generally a tall tale. It's usually easier for me to introduce it to people as a tall tale rather than say, I'm going to tell a lie, because people say I can turn on the news and get that anytime I want, or you can watch reality television, because that is nothing but. But generally, I mean, I'm okay with calling it a lie just for the sake of it, because it tends to add a little bit more. People might be a little bit more curious as to what it would involve, as opposed to a tall tale, because they may think of things in terms of like the Pecos Bill stories or Paul Bunyan, where it's just more like an Americana type thing. And I take the tradition, but I try to update it a little bit and put a
Yeah,
little
because we
different
have,
spin.
in addition to tall tales, there are jokes that tell a story. So do you do jokes that are narrative jokes?
Sometimes in some fashions, my lie or my tall tale is like an extended joke with just various punchlines and little things like that. A lot of my interest in performing actually came about from when I was really, really young. I wanted to be a comedian. And at the time, Steve Martin and Richard Pryor, a lot of people don't realize Steve Martin actually started in stand-up as far as being famous, and the younger generations don't realize that. They just know he plays banjo. But he was selling out stadiums. He was selling out venues that only rock bands were selling out. And even he admits, because if you listen to interviews with him now, he's a very intelligent man. But he was doing just crazy stuff. And he said that when he was coming up in comedy in the 60s, you had Lenny Bruce and some of these people with the darker edge that were trying to make a statement. And he said about saying, my day is going to come, and when it comes, I'm just going to be silly. And he did. And he pretty much laid the groundwork for a lot of people like, later on, like Jim Carrey and some of these other people that are doing the more outrageous kind of humor.
Yeah, Steve Martin, Two Crazy Guys. Remember that one from Saturday Night Live? I was a big fan of
The
Steve
arrow
Martin.
through the head.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
great stuff. So, you know, I know you have this career as a nurse, nurse practitioner. How does the comedy connect with your career, or does it?
Oh, it connects. I tell people I have a full-time job and I have a part-time job working with inpatient cardiology. And a lot of times on the weekends when I work, I'm not around the most happy people, you know. So I tell some of the doctors that I work with, part of my job, I'm here to support y'all. I'm here to support the patient. Some of the rest of what I do is comic relief. If I can go into the room where someone is worried about their heart condition or what's going to happen or what's happening to mom or daddy or whatever, if I can distract them just a little bit, or if I can make them smile or make them just chuckle about one thing, then I just kind of lifted them up a little bit, you know. Little pat on the back, keep your chin up, you know, you don't know. You know, sometimes I'll answer questions where I can. The ones that are too difficult are really the doctor's call to answer. My stock response for that is, hey, look, I was hired for looks and muscle, and I was running short on both. And so I try to work in comedy. Now, a lot of times it involves kind of like a quick read when I go into the room. Am I going to be able to joke with these people? You know, and if so, how? Because there are some people that you can go in and you can joke with and say, all right, look, you got to straighten up, you know, and they're receptive to that. Then there are other people where it's more like, you know, more akin to saying a knock-knock joke, you know. Then there are other people you don't joke. Oh, no, you don't know. You don't crack a smile or anything. It is strictly business.
Well, so where all do you get your repertoire for the kind of things that you would do at work versus the kind of things that you would perform at the Lion Contest or maybe other venues?
Well, work, just variety of sources. I cull everything. Any interaction with anybody is subject to be used in material at a later date. There are witnesses who will readily attest when they're with me somewhere, and I've developed characters. I write plays also. I've written 10-minute and one-act plays. And I've developed characters just on a Sunday drive. I see something, and suddenly I've got this line, and it's like, who would say that? I would tell you who would say that. It would be Praline. Praline would say that, because Praline would be the type of person that would say something like that. And then suddenly I've got this character, and I wrote her into a play. But they'll stop sometimes, we'll say something, or we'll be in a situation or just some weird interaction in the public, you know, and they'll turn to me and say, this is going to be in a routine, isn't it? This is going to be in a play. I was here for the moment that this character was developed. Is that the way it's going to be? It's, well, yeah, probably.
So where have your plays been performed?
Spectral Sisters is a local group in Alexandria. They perform original material. You have City Park players, and they do more the traditional established plays. And then you have the folks that I run with. And we're kind of like I'm not necessarily going to say renegade, we're a little bit edgier, but we sponsor playwriting workshops and directing workshops, and we do original material. We do a 10-minute play competition every year, and that's put on usually in June. And I think we're on the probably 15th or 16th year now of doing this. I've had several 10 minutes and a few one-act plays produced.
Interesting. Interesting. So how many of you are fans of John? And anybody already know his work? Okay.
Do coworkers count?
Well, I know you're getting interested in hearing this. One person asked me before, and I already asked you this, are you related to Justin Wilson?
No.
No. Are you finding any inspiration from him and his work?
I appreciate what he did for bringing Louisiana up some in the public viewpoint. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that's negative about Louisiana out there, and sometimes it just kind of makes me concerned that one of our biggest representatives for Louisiana is Britney Spears. You know.
Well, but then he's really not Cajun, and he's really not.
Yeah.
Like you said, he's from Mississippi.
But he did promote the culture a little bit.
And he
better.
promoted the culture, and maybe some people, some Cajuns were offended by it. So we kind of have to, watch our step when we're presenting humor from another ethnic group. And so I guess you don't feel like you're in that situation.
I'm not. I tend to have a pretty broad sense of humor and a pretty easygoing attitude toward a lot of that. Now, I do know some people, though. One of the more could be considered derogatory terms for Cajun. First name is Coon, the first syllable is Coon, and then the last syllable I won't say. But there are some people that I've known of that were highly offended. And I mean, if you made that reference, there might be a fight. I mean, they were willing to knock you out if you made that reference. Then I knew other people that had bumper stickers with it on their truck and saying they were registered and had the cartoon character and everything and saying, I'm a registered and proud of it. So it's really a case by case, but there are certain areas sometimes in certain communities that, but I try to stay away from addressing that aspect of it and try to stay kind of middle of the road.
So you have performed in South Louisiana and Lafayette at the Cajun Comedy Festival?
I competed in the amateur division. I made it to the semifinals twice. I don't think they participated in it or they sponsored it any longer, but they still have the comedy festival at the Hyman Center. But there are some local comedians and storytellers down there, and they don't do it professionally. They just kind of do it as like a sideline. Every now and then they perform. It was really interesting, though, to just kind of see what's going on down there and everything, and just get an idea as to where comedy is going in that area.
Well, were most of the performers in that with Cajun accents, or were they coming from all over?
Most of them were from the area. There were some that were really heavy accents. In fact, there was one in particular, he was an older gentleman, but you could tell that English was his second language. And because he was still speaking, and in fact, a lot of his jokes, I've spoken to people later on, they told the joke in French versus English, and they said it actually is funnier in French. They said going to English is somehow, alters the humor of it, and it just doesn't come across the same way.
Right, and there's heroes in the Cajun comedy area like A.J. Smith, who's one of the featured artists in Swapping Stories, the state storytelling book that was published, I think, in the early 90s, and also a film by the same name. And, you see that kind of humor, and I guess maybe some of your characters might be kind of similar to his from what I've heard about your work, and although I haven't been fortunate to see it, I'm really excited to get to see that. One other thing I found in your bio that Dr. Rasmussen gave me was this thing about you being an exorcist to the stars.
Well, T-Font is.
T-Font, okay.
T-Font is my persona.
T-Font is, okay. which leads, is that one of your characters you're going to bring out today?
That's my main one for storytelling, lying, etc.
Oh, great.
So,
well, I want
there
to
you go.
introduce you to Tifon then, and I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you. Just a moment, please. I only drink aged spring water. Barrel aged. Okay. How y'all doing? Good. Good? Wait, a little. Come see, come saw. We'll see if we can work on that. C'est bon? Okay. Pas mal? Pas mal. Not bad. We'll see. Depends on how this goes. There's a slight mistake on the program. It says John Wilson. I've heard of him. From what I know of him, he's okay. My name is Tifon. Tifon is a French name. T and fon. It's actually two words. T is little. Fon is butt or behind. Little butt. It's a name my grandfather gave me when they brought me back from the hospital, and he said he could hold my behind in the palm of his hand. That was a long time ago. Things change. Some things change, some things come back to the way they was. I think I got just about as much hair in my head now as I did then. But people ask me, they find out I'm from Louisiana, they say, well, how far south in Louisiana? Okay, for y'all from Natchitoches, I'm from Alexandria, which is a little bit further south, okay? If you're here, Natchitoches is already this south, okay? Especially if you're from up around Shreveport. So then Alexandria would be souther. Further beyond Alexandria would be southwest. So when people say, well, how far south are you? I say, you know swamp people? Yeah. I say, when I watch the show, I wonder why y'all got to have subtitles. Okay? Now, one barometer that I use to determine how far south I am in Louisiana, very simple. Hey! Yeah.
Aye.
All right, that's one. You from out of town, I bet. Yeah, okay. That's the official title for a Voiles parish, the best parish. Okay, that's a little bit southeast. Okay, so in South Louisiana, okay, the more people that respond in kind to that, if I say, aye, and people go, aye, the more people that respond to that in that way, the further south I am. If I get 100% response, that means chances are I'm going to have to take a P-road to check my mailbox. Okay? There's also a very good chance that when supper time rolls around, somebody might say, well, I got the rice cooking. What'd you find in the ditch? Okay? Louisiana's got some of the best food. I've talked to people that have been around the world, and they say Louisiana's the best food. Y'all know Jeff Foxworthy. Jeff Foxworthy married a woman from the parish. Won't say her name or anything because they don't want the attention. He's been around the world. He'll tell you Louisiana's got the best food. As long as there's a ditch on the side of the road, you're going to eat. I've had the opportunity to try other foods, though, that were not quite so good. I've been up north. I feel so sorry for those people. Memphis. Those poor people. They're paying for something that they call gumbo. It's bisque. And their red beans and rice, sure. That's truth in advertising, because that's all you got is red beans and rice. No sausage, no pepper, no cayenne, no Tony's, no nothing. Okay? I had to ask for Tabasco. I had to ask for Tabasco. I knew I was in the wrong place. Okay? So, one of my jobs, I have the opportunity to work with people from all over the world. They ain't from around here. And you can't get there and back in a day. So, there was one of them that I worked with. She wouldn't so much ask you to do something. She would just tell you. And you were going to do it. She wasn't mean about it, but the way that she would ask, you just knew. You're going to do it. So one day she just asked me, do you know anything about computers? I said, well, I can hook them up. I can turn them on. Okay, good. I got a new computer. You come hook it up tonight. Oh, okay. You know, she was kind of my boss. So, all right, yeah, all right. I'll do that. So I go to their house, and she and her husband had a very traditional house for where they live. You take your shoes off at the door. You walk in, everything is spotless and immaculate. Before I set up the computer, she offered me, which, you know, you pretty much have to accept, a traditional meal from their country called mung bean soup. Y'all ever heard of the mung bean? No. I'm going to tell you about it. Now, the mung bean is a real little teeny bean. It's about comme ça. All right? About like that. Grows on a bush. And they got to pick a whole bunch of them to make one bowl. Okay? Now, the trick to preparing the mung bean, you take all the mung beans, you put them in a pot of water, and you let them soak for about 3 days. 2/3 of them swell up. They go from about like that to about like that. Or no, they all swell up like that. Hang on. They all swell up like that. Then you drain the water out, you put some more water, and you boil them until all the taste is removed. You also keep going until the whole thing is reduced to this sticky, gooey, slimy stuff. 2/3 of them break down into this goo. And you serve it over dry white rice. Yeah. And if it's done right, the few that haven't dissolved into that goo, they bust in your mouth. Okay? Something else you need to know. It is so starchy that the first bite, all the moisture in your mouth is drawn out and gone. Good luck swallowing. And it's like, little bitty bowl like that felt like that. Probably took me 15 minutes to eat that, few spoons of it. Trying to swallow it down, they gave me a Pepsi, which to me is too sweet. I'm not a Pepsi generation person, but yeah, I did the best I could. I was being polite. I didn't gag. Finally got everything down. You want some more? Oh, no, it's so good, but it's so filling. Thank you. No. Hook up the computer, and I'm on my way. But when I left and I was going down the road, I knew something was not right. I could not tell. I did not know, but something was wrong. So they lived a little bit further out away from town. I turn onto the highway. I'm going down the highway. I'm maybe about 5-10 miles down. I start getting a little short of breath. I'm having trouble breathing. And at first it was just kind of mild, like I'd been walking upstairs real fast or something, but it started getting worse. And I started getting worried. I said, maybe I'm allergic to the mung bean. So I stopped in at an emergency room that was on the way. And I checked in, and by this point, my shortness of breath has gotten way worse. I'm checking in, I can barely say my name at the desk. I'm like, unbeknownst to me, what had happened was one of those mung beans that hadn't busted, was lodged between the vertex of my windpipe and my esophagus. And it was starting to swell. And it was cutting off some airflow. So I was so short of breath, they brought me right into the back, put me in a room on a gurney, and I'm waiting, and it's getting worse. It's getting worse. And the nurses come in to check me and get my vital signs, and my windpipe is now narrowed down. It's changed the tone of my voice, and I'm panicking, and I keep telling them, I've been eating mung beans, I've been eating mung beans. But they don't understand what I'm saying. Okay, so finally I'm lying on that gurney, and things are starting to get dark. It's starting to get black. I see dead relatives say, come on, T. It's like, goodbye, Allie Landry. And that's when the doctor came in with 3 of the biggest nurses I've ever seen. One of them, the biggest one, ooh, burly, handlebar mustache, forearms that look like bridge girders, big tattoo, Navy anchor. Name was Bertha. The doctor comes in, evidently he'd seen stuff like this before in his training. He takes one look at me. He turns to the nurse, he says, hold him down. One of them throws himself across my legs. One of them across my chest, almost got my hands back. He says, hold his arm out. You take my arm out like that. And the doctor takes it, grabs my hand like that, and it's freeze. He says, you ready? And he pulls my finger. I blacked out. I was asleep for 3 days. I woke up when they were pulling me out from the wreckage. That mung bean with the obstruction was causing a buildup of gas. And the doctor, by pulling that finger, released the gas. It was not a controlled release. So that's when my troubles really started. Because I destroyed that entire emergency room. All of the people in the waiting room, all of the people on the staff, even some of the people in the parking lot, they filed a class action lawsuit against me for damages. The hospital's suing me for damages for their emergency room. The nurses are suing me. One of them's gone blind, the other one says she can't smell. OSHA is after me for releasing toxins into a work environment. DEQ is citing me for release of an unlicensed emission. And Wildlife and Fisheries says I done killed all the wood duck. But meanwhile, the hospital, when word got out of all the hubbub and everything, they kept it quiet as to the reason. But then they went to the newspaper and they went to the TV station, they went to all of them and they said, we are building a brand new emergency room. It's part of our renovation. It's all going to be shiny and pretty and have all these extra beds and all this stuff. And then the only other hospital in Alexandria said, well, we are too. So there you go. I'm responsible for the construction of 2 brand new emergency rooms in Alexandria. And my life is wrecked, all because of one little old mung bean. So whenever somebody offers you some mung bean, you tell them, no, go get you some Domino's or something, anything better than that. That's it. Okay. I can add something in. Want to hear another? Yeah. Okay. This is the second one I told that one. Okay. No, I need a chair for this one. Just use that. I'm not going to use a rolling one, though. All right. Y'all remember my name, right? T-Funk. All right. How y'all doing? You all right? It's okay? Mm-hmm. It's bad. It's bad. Been having some problems. I just realized today I've been confusing my Preparation H with my toothpaste. I didn't have a problem. I've been doing it about 4 or 5 days, it turns out. I didn't have a problem until today, and I realized now I got the problem. It does explain why my gums have been receding, and it also explains why I got that minty fresh feeling. Anyway, I'd like to go do something, but everything's so expensive with healthcare and everything. I mean, I remember when I was young, we go see a traiteur. Y'all ever heard of that? The traiteur? It's kind of like the Cajun healer, because you didn't have no money, or there might not be a doctor in the area. So you would go to the traiteur, and they would heal you. And then over the night, you maybe give them some mustard greens, leave it at the door. You know, you never pay directly. Or you leave them, you know, because you don't have any money, but maybe you got some deer meat. Maybe you got some mustard greens or some eggs. You can use that. I remember it was hard times back then, you know. We'd work in the fields. I remember my grandmother, she would save up, she'd take cotton and she'd work it into thread. And then she'd take and make that into a shirt. And that was our Christmas gift. Usually we'd get a new shirt. Well, at first, that shirt is the going to church, going to the Fête d'Odo, going to weddings, funerals. Gets a little bit older. It becomes more your everyday shirt. Then it becomes your shirt you're working out in the fields. Then it starts getting holes in it and patches. Well, then you can take parts of it and you can use it to clean the house or clean your rifle. Starts breaking down to thread. You got fishing line, dental floss. You can braid it together, make boot laces. And eventually it breaks down just to fluff. We take that fluff, we give it to my grandmother. She would take and spin it into thread and then into a sheet. And before you know it, you're getting a new shirt for Christmas. But I remember one time, my grandfather's family, they all laid brick. And he had this one nephew, Roy. Roy had a bad problem. Y'all know the little thing that hangs down in the back of the throat? That is known as the galulalali. I study medicine, I know. His problem was the galulalali was hanging too far down in the back of his throat. So all day long, it was coughing and gagging. He's driving everybody crazy. It wasn't so bad the coughing and gagging, but all the complaining he was doing about it on top of that. Until finally my grandfather said, look, I know somebody's going to help you. When we get done with work, we're going to go down and see him. Okay, so I was going to go too, might as well. Didn't have nothing else to do. It was the summer. Didn't have no homework. So we get in the trucks. We go down the highway. We take a turn off onto blacktop. We take a turn off of that onto gravel. Take a turn off of that onto sand, then turn off of that into mud. Before you know it, we're driving down the bayou. I don't know where we was. We were so deep in the bayou, we met ourselves coming out, which was good because we were able to get directions. So we finally find this man's place, and it's a little corrugated tin shack out in the middle of nowhere. Gator's eyes gleaming in the back. They knock at the door, and I hear this sound. And a voice.
Ouvrez la porte. Entrez. Open the door, come in. So open the door and we walk in, just one candle flame, and right there is the tallest man I ever done seen. Long arms, hands look like big spiders at the end of his arms. He had that one bad eye. You never knew where he was looking. He might be looking at you, he might not, but you never took the chance. And that sound that I'd heard was the sound of his head scraping that tin as he would walk through. So they tell him about the problem. He says, okay. He tells Roy, he gets a chair, he tells Roy, sit. Roy sits. Meanwhile, the man's walking around him, and he's looking through his hair. And he goes all the way around, walks around that chair 2 or 3 times, until finally finds this one spot of his hair, like right above where the galoolalai is. And he says, don't make a sound. I was scared for my life. I was only 15. I didn't know what he was going to do. He took and he grabbed a handful of that hair and he pulled up. And Roy came with it. And his eyes were wide. And he let go and Roy sat back down. And before he could even make good contact with the seat, he grabbed that hair again. He was pulling it up. He was going to pull that galoolalai up where it needed to be. I saw my cousin going up and down like a yo-yo. I felt bad for him. I saw the tears in his eyes. I knew it had to hurt. At the same time, there was something about it. It was kind of funny, but I didn't want to laugh. And then the man said something that filled me with dread. Roy hit that seat again, and he turns to us. And he says, y'all gonna have to hold him down. I was scared. Yeah, I held him down. I didn't know what he was going to do. I already saw what he was doing to Roy. He was trying to help him. If I don't do what he says, God only knows what's going to happen to me. Back in the swamps, that gator might be fed. So he finished the treatment. It worked. Roy never complained about that galoolalai again. Now, we always noticed he was a little bit cross-eyed after that, but he said it was okay. He didn't want nothing done about it. I wonder if that old man can treat hemorrhoids.
We have about 5 minutes if anybody has any questions or if Tifon has another story. Any questions?
Tell us about Praline.
Praline? Praline was a character that got developed because we were riding around one Sunday through a newer subdivision, and some of these places have these little, they're not quite McMansions, but it's one of those places where kind of ostentatious. And there was this one particular house, I'm not making this up, that had almost like a Western style, but then the very front part of the front porch, there was a section of it that was painted bright highlighter green. And it was a sore thumb because everything else was tan or beige or some other variant of that. And so this highlighter green color in the middle of it with a Japanese sculpture, I think, somewhere on the front porch and in the door, something like that. And I just said, oh, that is so pretty. And then it's like, there's Praline. That's what's her name? Praline. That's her name. And she is one of the main characters in the story Praline's Cutting Style, where she has been kicked out of beauty school for the 3rd time, and she is living with her disabled mom and her knuckle-dragging brother, and she cuts hair on the back porch part-time to try and make ends meet and get a little practice. And like her brother says, she practices on stray dogs in the alley, and it's a shame what a dog will do for just a piece of bologna. But the catcher put down 3 of them when he saw them because he thought they had some kind of new mange. So, and her best friend is the woman she's cutting the hair of, and her name is Viola. And so it's mostly, it was just three people in the play. It was more of a character study. But that's Praline.
Where do you perform those two plays?
Those are at the Crest Theater. Yeah, Crest Theater. If you, Spectral Sisters has a website and a Facebook page. Spectral, Spectral, like a ghost, and then Sisters. Now there are several other Spectral Sisters, and they're like paranormal investigators or whatever. This is the one that does plays, and you know, sometimes it feels like some of our stuff is cursed, but you know, can't vouch for that.
Any other questions?
Is that the one with the cake that was for the?
Yes, you saw that one. Yeah.
Is that the
Yeah.
one with a cake?
Yes, there was one mention of the cake that they talk about a baby shower, where they do the thing where they cut the cake in whatever color it's supposed to be. And one thing that you need to know is the family in question is African descent that they're speaking of. And so they paid to get a cake, and it was supposed to be dyed either blue or pink, but the order wasn't done correctly at the bakery, and so when they cut the cake, it was yellow. And so they said that, you know, so-and-so, you know, when he saw yellow, he said he got his gun because he was about to shoot somebody.
Any other questions? If you just joined us, what?
I have indeed eaten
Has
mung
he
beans.
eaten mung beans? Is that the question?
Yes. Have I eaten mung beans? That, every good lie, okay, first off, if you have voted, bought a used car, or done any business with a bank, you have been subjected to lying, okay? So it's not like a remote incident, but every good lie starts with one little grain of truth. And like I tell people, anybody can tell a good lie. You woke up this morning, sir? There you go, there's your springboard. You didn't wake up? We have a miracle. I'm gonna follow you. What's your name? Fontenot. Oh, he is risen, and he's Kajak.
I noticed that the two stories you told both had medical motifs in them.
Speak about what you know. But actually, the second story actually did happen. It really, honestly did happen. My dad was actually the witness for that because it happened before I was born. And my dad would tell that story, and then I decided to use that in the lying competition. But he said it actually truly happened. Now, my mom actually saw a traitor also. She went to Bolton High School, and Bolton was a very old school, still standing today, still going. But it had steam heaters, and they got really hot. And at one point, I think she got pushed into one of the radiators, and it actually burnt the seal from the radiator into her leg. And he took her to a doctor, and they were saying she was going to be scarred for life. And so, as it was told to me, my grandfather took her to a traiteur that put her on his kitchen table and told her, don't make a sound. Do not say anything, don't cry out, nothing. And said he started praying, and he put his hands on the scar, and his hands felt, my mom says his hands felt really, really hot. And she has no scar on her leg. I can't explain it. I mean, I work with science. I work in medicine and nursing. There is a scientific background, but at the same time, I have to understand there are some things that we're better off not being able to explain. You know? And there are no ready explanations. Just accept it and keep going.
Well, we want to thank you for joining us for our session with John Wilson on storytelling. And there's another session coming up at 12 o'clock, I believe. So thank you very much for joining. If you'd like to come up and chat with him afterwards, that'll be great. Thank you.
Thank you. Enjoyed it.